Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Optimizing for player performance has taken on a whole new meaning over the past few years. It is not only about achieving peak physical performance, mental awareness and overall well-being have been found to be just as important. So, for this week's episode, we bring you an amazing panel with 5 top-tier sports industry experts, including Kirsten Holmes, Vice President Performance Science at Whoop, Dr. Meeta Singh, an expert in the science of sleep, who actually visited the podcast on episode number 4. Check that out. Definitely. You'll learn a ton of things about sleep. Agustina de Giovanni, the Director of Mental Performance and Culture at DC United. Matteo Bartalucci, the Head of Medical Services at Formula Medicine. And Thomas Roos, CEO and co-founder, but he's also a professional triathlete and a science consultant. This was a panel moderated by Alejandro Sánchez from the Real Madrid Business School at Universidad Europea in Madrid. And you will see them talk about the factors that help develop mental resilience, such as sleep and self-awareness, the critical importance of sleep regularity, sleep depth, and the challenges in the sports industry that prevent athletes from achieving it. Why the connection between mind and body is foundational for achieving peak performance. Finally, the role of technology in helping football teams and players predict injuries before they actually happen. To be honest, this was simply a fantastic panel. Probably one of the best we had during the event. Although I must admit, I am a bit biased since this is a topic that really amazes me. Speaking of performance, this week we have also published a special report in collaboration with Thermohuman, looking at 5 specific barriers to the sports industry that make it difficult for players and/or teams to achieve optimal player performance. In fact, some of the people participating in this episode were part of that workshop. You can download it now at the World Football Summit webpage, and we can include the link in the show notes as well. Also, guys, remember, tickets are now available for WFS Europe. If you purchase your ticket today, you get 2 tickets for the price of 1. But hurry up. We have a limited number of passes available, and the offer expires on January 31st. Remember that World Football Summit will return to Sevilla on September 20 and 21st of this year. The biggest football industry event is already on the horizon. So, if you want to join the leaders that will shape the future of football, this is your opportunity. Head over to www.worldfootballsummit.com. Again, that's www.worldfootballsummit.com, and buy your ticket now. And with that, on to the panel with Kirsten, Meeta, Agustina, Matteo, and Thomas.
The first question, or the first idea we want to comment is, what is at the foundations of mental and physical health resilience? Kirsten, what do you think?
Yeah, I think folks probably have a lot of different opinions, but I think if we think about it at a foundational level, there are very specific physiological and psychological variables or influences that move around our ability to exert resilience. And resilience, I think we kind of need to define it because we probably will say that word a fair amount. In my view, it's our capacity to adapt to external stress in a functional way. If I can adapt to stress in a functional way, for the most part, I'm doing okay. There's things that are going to move around our ability to adapt to stress in a functional way. Number one, without a doubt, is sleep. And we have a sleep scientist and researcher and medical doctor to be able to glom on there. But I do a lot of research as well in this area. And I think at the very foundation, and we see this bubble up in the research that we're doing. We just finished a huge research study with the U.S. Army, which will go to publication. And then we see tons of data emerge in our very large data set at Whoop, where we're measuring sleep, strain, and recovery. And the single most important behavior that we see move around, and again, we're talking about the foundation of physical and mental health resilience, what we see moves around physical and mental health resilience the most is the degree to which individuals stabilize when they go to bed and when they wake up. It's called sleep regularity. Andrew Phillips coined this. He's a sleep scientist out of Monash. We call it sleep consistency. And we measure this, and we're 99.9% accurate, being able to tell you when you're awake and when you're not. So this is a metric that is very good, very accurate. And again, we see this bubble up as being the biggest predictor of mental and physical health resilience. So physical resilience measured by the objective markers that we're tracking. So heart rate variability and resting heart rate, for example, and then respiratory rate and some of the other metrics that we're tracking. Psychological resilience, all the gold standard of how we measure someone's psychological resilience are being taken into account. And again, so from my vantage point and what I've been able to see in the data, sleep consistency is probably at the foundation of mental and physical health resilience.
Well, what I was going to say, I was going to tag on to what you're saying. So if you think about the basics of what is important for performance and wellness, it really comes down to nutrition, training, and sleep, right? So if you think of those three as being foundational, and you also take into account the fact that we spend 1/3 of our life sleeping, right? Which means that the time that when you're not really on the playing field, a majority of that is actually while you're sleeping. And I just want to come back and just explain what Kirsten was talking about. So, when you think about sleep, you think about things like how much sleep you've got, which is the quantity of sleep. Typically 7 to 9 hours is what is recommended. You talk about the good quality of sleep, is which how well you're sleeping through the night. How much you're awake at night, etc. But then there's the regularity, which is you're trying to go to bed at the same time and trying to wake up at the same time, which becomes a big issue for any professional sports, because the way that football or any other sport is structured, it has varying schedules. The time that you compete is different. You also take into account travel, which is becoming more and more significant. And so regularity becomes the one aspect of sleep that is most difficult to accomplish when you're a professional athlete. And so it becomes really, really important to sort of, to focus on that. And of course, the fact that you can now get data, that's brilliant. And then then the second step is what you do with that data.
I'd like to add something.
Yeah, please.
I'm obsessed with sleeping. Everyone knows me. I love it. And I know being a swimmer, sleeping all the time, being obsessed because we don't have time to sleep. We don't have time to do anything but swimming. I'm going to talk from a coach. As a coach, it's hard for me sometimes because I think I talk as a swimmer or an athlete. But talking as a coach, how I coach my soccer players or football players, of course, understanding them that sleeping is important, the quality of sleeping, what time they're going to sleep, that's the biggest discussion we have often. But mind resilience, the meaning of resilience with the work with the guys and the girls is what do they do when they have to struggle? That's how they see resilience, or that's how we train resilience based on results. Because as all we all know, we live based on results. And especially in football, especially at least in the league that I work in, and if we don't win, then there is a big issue for the head coach, for the president or owner of the club, and for the captain, and for everyone. So even myself, I have pressure because we haven't won in how many days and stuff like that. So when we work on resilience, after looking into all this data, is how do the player try to resignificate what they're doing, how they push through it. I have a lot of players injured, so we need to coach them. What is the meaning, and where are they going to find their strength to overcome the different challenges? So it's like we have different meanings of resilience and how you use the data from, and if it's from how we, for example, the sleeping part, I have to educate them first because a lot of them don't know, and I make them use your devices, for tracking that. But also there's a lot of education, and then that's where they play from, and here.
Yeah, because we are speaking about the sleep, but there are two contextual factors that you say. One is wrestle, the other is schedule, no? We were speaking before about Formula One, for example, schedule.
For a Formula One driver, it's a nightmare. They are increasing the number of races all over the world. So basically, they live on a plane. So thanks to the technology, of course, they know how to deal with a jet lag disorder. But I agree with that. The management of sleep is one of the most important things when we're talking about performance and resilience. And another thing that, in my opinion, is important is the self-awareness. This is why in our mental gym, whatever we try to do with our athletes, and we do a lot of mental tests while we monitor their brain activity and their heart rate, is to show them how their body is reacting in front of different mental tests. So putting them in front of numbers in terms of brain activation, brain strain, heart rate is the only way to raise their awareness, and is the only way to make sure that they can control their body when they are under stress in difficult situation. And I think this is the big value of what we have been doing so far inside the mental gym. A lot of drivers come back to us to say that now that they have been training with us, when they jump inside the car, they can really understand the moment when they start to overthink, when they start to get tense, because of course there are a lot of connection in the mind and between the mind and the muscle. So the more you start to overthink, the more you get tense, the more you lose coordination, and the more you can fail your goals. So there are a lot of things inside the word resilience, but I think that one of the most important things, apart from sleep, is the raise of the self-awareness. Because the more you know yourself, the more you know how your body is reacting to different kind of stress, the more you can control and manage yourself, even in difficult situations and when you are under pressure. This is why, for example, we do a lot of tests inside the mental gym in competition, just to try to put a pressure on the athletes. And we have, for instance, a test where the only thing we require the athletes to do is to stay focused, okay? And we see the heart rate sometimes is over 130, and the only thing they have to do is to stay focused. So especially drivers, when they are in competition, they get really tense, and it's really funny to see.
Thomas, you are still competing. You were saying, I think you are totally agree with Dr. Assange with the foundations of what is a top performance athlete.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue also now to talk about like a framework for optimal physical performance and physical resilience. And, it basically comes down to, as elite athletes, we push our bodies to the breaking point. And the holy grail of using data and technology is to understand when you're one training session away from being injured, and then back it off just enough and understand exactly how much recovery you need so you can start training again at the appropriate intensity and duration as soon as possible. Longevity in sporting careers is from finding this happy spot in the physical performance side. And I think that's something that we're getting much better at now versus 10 years ago, and we see this in the data, so something I didn't yet mention. I'm also an athlete representative and work at the International Olympic Committee on the Science and Medical Department, and we've been tracking now at the Olympic Games performances, injuries, and illnesses now for about 20 years, and we see clear trends in increasing injuries amongst athletes in certain sports and decreased in other sports. And we're really mandated now to try to find this medium of where you can be physically in your prime on that day at the Olympics. That's the holy grail, because you got one shot to win that gold medal. Combining that now with all the stuff that we're talking about mental and how the mind helps the body achieve that ideal performance. And I think that's something as elite athletes, you takes you a couple years to figure your body out. And what one of my goals is to help coaches and other athletes understand that we have the tools now where you can shortcut this trial and error process and bring it down from, let's just take an example of 5 years to maybe 2 to 3 years, where you can find this right balance to achieve the optimal physical performance.
I would like to share sort of like experience. I was listening to all you and thinking this is amazing, and we all agree. And I wish I knew you before. And I always try to check myself. No, but I know.
I wish they were my coaches.
I know. Try to bring myself back into reality and say, so sorry, I'm going back to football all the time, to soccer all the time, and trying to be practical, because I think the big gap, at least for the mental side, the mental training is, we always know the why, the what, but not the how. And what we are experiencing, my colleagues in America at least, is that this data is amazing. However, we face a football culture that is different. I come from the Olympic world, and this is normal. And then I got into the football world, and it takes some time, and it takes some people that are actually very educated and prepared, but it takes time for even the coaching staff and trying to transmit it to the players and trying to make it real. And I wish that process will be accelerated so we can.
I totally agree that the football culture is so strong, and sometimes it's difficult for us in football introducing new ideas coming from other areas or sport for sure. We have started to speak about injuries, and I want to ask you, for the things that you are saying, what are the steps where this mental training that all of you are putting in practice, how can help, or what are the steps for developing this training? Matteo, if you want.
Yeah, for example, the mental gym that we have is really close to the physical gym that we have. They have more or less the same dimension, because we really believe that there must be a combination of the two. So, for example, each athlete is training with us is training 50% of the time in the physical gym, 50% of the time in the mental gym. But why all that? Because we did a lot of research in the past that demonstrated how the brain of the top drivers inside a functional MRI scan was different compared to the normal people. They were medical students, or not very normal people. But anyway, the same age, so we can do a comparison between the two groups. And the difference was not in terms of performance. Let's take a simple example, the reaction time, okay? If we compare the reaction time of professional drivers and not drivers, they are exactly the same. It means that I can beat Charles Leclerc 50% of the time in reaction time. So the big difference is how much brain resources a not driver person need to put to obtain the same result. And this characteristic is being called by our scientists mental economy or neural efficiency. So their ability to save energy while trying to reach high performance. And from there, we started to develop a methodology which we call mental economy training, which is true not only for mental performance, but also for the physical training, because due to all the connection that we have between muscle and brain, we believe that if you're able to save energy, to optimize the brain resources, you can get less muscular tension, and so you can get less injury compared to others. So for us, this is what we call psychophysical exercises. There is a perfect combination between mental training and physical training that can reduce the number of injuries as well.
And that.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Meeta.
Okay. Well, that mental training that he's talking about, that's one thing that can separate you from another elite athlete who has perhaps the same, physical and other abilities. So what you do during practice, if you can do exactly that during the real competition, that ability is what might differentiate you from another player of the same caliber. And of course, it takes mental training. I mean, I'm biased, and I can tell you that there are different prediction models meant for, say, injury prediction, and typically, like most of the data shows, it's like sleep is really, really important, because what happens is that if you get less sleep, your reaction time is impaired, your accuracy is reduced, but in addition to that, your judgment, your decision making, etc., is significantly impaired. And if your judgment is impaired while you're slower and less accurate, you're going to put yourself in a position in which the chances of injury is going to increase. But I also want to just circle back to what Agustina was talking about, because that is the importance of education. Because typically clubs, especially if they've been successful, or The clubs that have been around for a long time have been doing things at a certain way. And, it's same old. And so to introduce new concepts to them, it takes a while. You have to really talk to them, and you have to sort of sell the science to them to make it more easier for them to talk about.
It's about trust and credibility and coming in with an open mind and presenting things in the elite world of sports, and not thinking that you're the best ever, and leaving your ego at the door and really collaborating with everyone within the club. And I think
trying to speak their own language, from athlete to athlete to player, from player to player, something similar. Trying to make it easier, right?
What we have seen work, at least in the work that I've been working on in professional football, is with injury reductions and these models for injury reduction, and adding in new components like genetic testing and blood biomarker testing. And eventually we're going to get to where we're doing whole omics profiling on elite level athletes. The cost right now is like $1 million if you want to do this for one person, but it's coming down exponentially. The cost of these technologies is dropping twice as fast as Moore's law, and our computational power is growing exponentially with the new generation of GPUs and supercomputers and the AI and the ML models that we've built. And so while our injury prediction right now is not great, and I'm a scientist, and I will tell you exactly, honestly, what the situation is for technologies or risk prediction models or whatever. It's not very good right now for some injuries, but for others it is. And so we're going to get better at this by incorporating all these other covariates and influencers that we haven't yet captured in the data. And then it'll be just a question of validating it. So we can think of it as, is it scientifically valid? If it is, then yes, you can go to the next step. Then is it clinically valid or clinically meaningful? And if it is, then yes, then you can start approaching the elite football clubs and asking, in the sporting specific context, for the use that the club wants to use it, does this have any sporting utility? So it could be great. The science could be fantastic. But if it's not going to move the needle on what a coach does or how an athlete trains, then there's no sport-specific utility, and it's not worth the price at this point.
Kirsten, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, we have huge amounts of sporting data across all professional sports, as well as many EPL teams, and so lots of football as well. And I can tell you, if the athletes can get sleep right, you can simplify your life a ton. I mean, we see in the data, we have a metric called sleep debt, and it's basically, we will recommend how much time you need to spend in bed. And the delta between how much time you spend in bed and what you actually spend in bed is a metric called sleep debt. We see that athletes who keep this under 45 minutes literally are bulletproof. There might be a contact injury or a weird injury, but
you can't prevent the contact injuries of ACL injuries if there's enough.
Of course, right. And there's genetic and there's all sorts of variables, obviously, that you have to account for, right? But when we're just looking at illness and injury burden and things that we can control, I mean, keeping sleep debt under 45 minutes is a path to that. That will get you probably 80% of the way there. And it's a figuring out. I mean, I was a coach at Princeton University for 13 seasons, and that is a place where the culture is horrible there in terms of, the president of the university wore a t-shirt that said sleep is for the weak. So I was fighting a lot of cultural issues there. But as a coach, you work with the players and you give them the data, you let them know this is the difference maker. This is the greatest competitive advantage you can possibly get is literally 8 hours of sleep, and 9 if you can swing it. And they would commit to 4 days a week. They would be consistent with their sleep, and they would meet the sleep that they need. And if you can tackle it from that approach, then it's a lot easier to talk yourself into a better future. My background is in sports psychology, and my PhD's in psychology. I spent a lot of time in this space, and if you have sleep debt, you do not have the mental resilience. And Meeta gave you a laundry list of what happens physically and mentally and emotionally when you have sleep debt. You fix the sleep, and 90% of your problems go away. I feel pretty confident in saying that.
I think so. And I want to just again circle around to what you said about the clubs. I mean, if you think about what a normal schedule, say, for a MLS team is.
Yeah.
Right? And so think about not just the fact that all the people who actually take care of the players, including the coaches, get there before the players. They leave after the players are done, and they don't get paid as much. And then they're living that life, right? So it is a matter of slowly changing the culture. And I think that's the reason why we have a panel here talking about it, right? Yeah. Because we are trying to bring this, perhaps newer concepts that haven't been discussed before. And it really does start with education and awareness, as you were talking about.
I think that, I'm not working in a football world, unfortunately. But I think that, they have the same problem as the Formula One drivers. So
right.
I don't know how the football player solve it. If they are taking medication to sleep, if they can fall asleep, because I guess that straight after a match, at least for me, it would be really difficult to fall asleep. So I need to understand how to switch off my brain. And this is not easy, especially if you're not aware of how your brain is working.
Well, of course, that's something that we have to adapt every time we finish our match. We have to adapt what time we train the next day, if we're flying back or whatever we have to do the next day, just because we know we don't only get home at 12 o'clock at night or maybe 2 or 11, but then we take into account how much time it takes for the player to slow down. And sometimes, especially when you play at home, sometimes it's even worse, because when you play away, okay, you're flying or whatever, and that gets you more tired. But then when you play at home, then you have to add more or less 4 hours as the average we have to add. For them, if we've had to train the next day, try to make sure it's at least 4 hours later than usual. And going back to the sleeping habits and things like that, we know for sure that when they don't sleep as a whole, as a group, always I give you examples because I'm there every day. They're in such a bad mood. Like the locker room, my gosh. So I'm like, okay, guys, I have to go to sleep. And tomorrow we have to go a little bit later, because remember, they don't only are players, but they're adults. They have families, they have children. So you had to adapt to that. And my approach based on this data, and my approach is trying to translate all this amazing data that, again, I'm in love with it, to an easier language for them to say, okay, I like it. If it's too complicated, I'm like, no, okay, this is too much. For me, it's going to be another thing that I have to do that I'm already doing a lot. This sounds really hard. So trying to adapt to that as an easier way. And something that's really interesting regarding the stress related to injuries, we have data that players that find out that they're going to be parents for the first time have almost 80% chance of injury before the baby is born. It's amazing. Wow. So we have to make sure day by day. Not all the players are obligated to work with me. The majority of them work with me, but the ones that don't, I have to make sure if that happens, then to try to approach them, because something happens internally. I'm not a man, so I can't tell you what happens, but I know for the facts when they talk, there are a lot of questions what to happen to, my wife is not going to pay attention to me, and sounds silly, but they get injured. Like 80% of the chances. But then in the second baby, it just goes down to 20 to 30%. So in the everyday thing, again, I give you everyday examples. I have to make sure I follow them. So I have to tell the coach, this is happening, this is not happening. So if they have to press a lot, it's a day of a lot of workload, then you have to go back to make sure the player is being taken care of.
You say one important thing now, and I think it's obvious, you are not a man. I want to ask you, and we start with the woman, maybe.
Yeah.
Do you think that there are gender differences in this recovery process, in this mental training? Yeah.
Sex differences. Yeah. Yeah, we do. We're doing quite a lot of research in the female physiology area. How many folks are responsible for the care of female athletes or the performance? If you can just raise your hand. Just curious. Is there anyone?
Even panelists, you can raise your hand too.
Who has a sister, a wife, a girlfriend, a daughter? Raise your hand.
Cousin.
All right, we got folks. So the menstrual cycle definitely is going to impact women differently. Just a quick one too. There's roughly 28 days of the menstrual cycle. I'm going to get how this relates to recovery because it's just very, very clear sex differences in the data. In the luteal phase, that is when you're preparing for menses, preparing for the menstrual cycle, and that's roughly a couple weeks. And then your follicular phase is menses and ovulation, and this is for women who are naturally cycling. But if you know of women who are playing professional sports or clubs that you're potentially affiliated with or working with, they need to start to learn that women are not small men, and we need to train differently than men as a result. The follicular phase is a low hormone phase. As a result, that's menses and ovulation. As a result, we can train way harder. We're more primed to adapt to external load during that time frame. So that's when we want to do, all of our kind of functional overreaching as much as we can. So we really want to try to push our bodies. And then the luteal phase, that's where more technical, more technique-based training would be more appropriate. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't go hard to the luteal phase. I can't play in a match and do very well, but just understand that needs during that time are increased. It's a very effortful kind of phase of the cycle. My body is doing a ton of work during that time. As a result, I need to probably intake more sodium. I need to extend my sleep. And WHOOP has actually done some work with Dr. Stacy Sims. She was a principal investigator on some research that we published looking at 10,000 women. So it's a huge data set. And we saw these physiological perturbations across this 4-week cycle. And as a result, we're able to coach women around their sleep, around their training, using these data to be able to guide that effort. So it was kind of a really novel finding, the first data set of its kind, which is really cool. And to be able to kind of coach women in an area that literally has never been done before is pretty sweet. So if you know someone, if you know a woman,
Yes.
she can benefit.
Well, and I mean, if you think about it, we've come from an age or a time where even talking about the menstrual cycle is not something that is done on a regular basis. And again, it has a lot of complications because if you're in a team sport, so let's talk about women's soccer, right? If you're in a team sport, there is a certain schedule for the games. And so there's the training and everything that's made to it, and yet females are individuals, so they have individual cycles and their individual physiology, and so you want to be able to fit and give them advice that will fit into them still being able to play at their maximum best when the team game actually happens, right? So it comes to the same thing that you want to look at the science, and then you want to take the science, take it and give recommendations that are based broadly, but as well as individually. And, we've always, that's something that's evolving, but this extra layer of that being female actually makes you even more different is something that it's good to keep on our radar.
Yeah, unfortunately, in my field, there are not a lot of females, but we have been asked from different big institutions to do a research project into that. And this is what we have been doing in the last month, and we are keeping studying this because, of course, there are differences in terms of physical performance. I guess that I've never tried to drive a Formula One car. But I think it's really demanding. This is what they always tell us. So I guess that this is one of the reasons why maybe a female is not driving a Formula One car. But I think there should be any other difference in terms of mental performance. And I believe they are way better compared to us. But we are really looking forward to complete the study to understand exactly the difference in terms of brain performance, because from a scientific point of view, we all know that there are different skills where women are better than men, so visual spatial skills or something else. But we are really looking forward to have a better understanding of this.
Thomas?
Yeah, so we know there are definitely gender differences and individual differences in recovery and physiological adaptation to stress and to stimulus. And so this is like at the fundamental biological level. And I guess we're all working on it. And in the endurance sports context, in the triathlon context, with the professional triathlete organization, as the head of the science committee, we've just launched, we're going to do a 5-year longitudinal study comparing the top 50 men and women triathletes in the world and track as much data as we can, get as many, all the external, internal data, everything from them, and try to kind of untangle some of these differences between what is working for the women and men, and then be able to apply that hopefully and maybe, but I no guarantees, into the context of team sports and other sports. So we can talk about that in 5 years when we have the results.
We'll be here.
Regarding my expertise, of course, I work with both men and women, and in the everyday, again, my approach and expertise is working with them before practice and before training, and trying to make them have the best training, understanding that whatever you do in practice from Monday to Friday is how you're going to play Saturday or Sunday. So in that approach, of course, we have the woman we tend to talk easier or faster or getting to the point faster. However, since this is like mental gym and we try to make mental reps, and go to the field, trying to see if they understand the coaches and things like that. In that sense, the men are also very capable, because they take more time to trust you, I want to tell you, at the beginning. But then once they do, they're faithful. They get there, they know this because they see the results. So once they're there, they can actually go apply and then bring back and then try to, actually their communication improves. So within the team, it improves again, which means with the coach too. So in the mental training with the guys, that's the improvement that we have seen.
Okay, we are arriving at the end of this conference, only 5 minutes remaining. I want to finish this conference doing a question. I will start with Agustina, I will finish with Kirsten. Have 1 minute only for putting the reflection on the table, okay?
Good.
So after all the things that we have been speaking and been said, what do you think, can peak performance and well-being coexist in the life of professional players and athletes?
Yes, they can. It can. I think because of the, I'm self-referent, but if you train your mind, if you train towards whatever you want, it can be reached. Of course, we're under pressure as players, as athletes, everything. If it's high performance, then sometimes it seems hard, like, oh, you have no life, you have nothing, you have to make a lot of sacrifices for your career. However, if you organize yourself, example is sleeping, you organize the race and you train your mind, whatever you want to do, I know it sounds cursy, but whatever you want and whatever your mind wants to do, it can happen. You just need discipline, you need to be resilient, you need to train and understand how the mind works, and then you're going to get results. And most importantly, you will retire when you want, and the sport won't retire. And the retirement, which can be another hot topic, is something really hard for us. So preparing ourselves during the career, it will be really important to face your new life after that.
Thomas, you are still there. So
yeah, I'll take a slightly different perspective on answering this and say that they can coexist and lead to optimal well-being and optimal performance. And it's only going to increase in the future as everything is going to become totally personalized in elite sports. And we're seeing the trend towards that. And I'm not a futurist, I'm a pragmatist about this. I 100% guarantee to all of you that in 10 years, elite level sports, everything will be measured in your body. Will understand at the cellular level and the systems level what is happening inside the body in real time. And then that data can be used to find that optimal level where we find this balance. And so it's coming. Be prepared for it. Most professional sports teams and leagues aren't 100% yet prepared for it, but we'll adapt, and hopefully that will help the well-being and the safety and the performance of all athletes so they can reach their genetic potential.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I mean, I think not only they can coexist, but they should.
They should.
Coexist.
Yeah,
and I think
that's all of our goals. That's what we strive for.
Yeah, correct. So you cannot have peak performance. You are not feeling well in terms of awareness of how you are. So we need to do something to make sure that wellness, and we need to reduce the fear to talk about mental performance and mental health. So I think that especially in football, there is still a stigma about mental performance. And I'm sure that if I approach a top football player to say, you probably need some mental training, he would say, no, I don't need that because I'm fit and well.
I'm not weak, I'm strong.
Correct. So this is why, especially with our athletes, we have been working a lot on the communication of the mental training. This is why our sports psychologist is always wearing the same uniform as we do. So they train on the mental side without even know that they are training inside the mental gym. So.
Well, I would say that I do agree with all of you. I think it's a laudable goal. I think we are far from it. I don't think we're there as yet, because I think that most of the research shows that athletes are physically definitely better, way better than perhaps the average human being. But they are also more likely to have mental health and sleep health issues, given the fact that they work in these high stress, high performance areas. And I think that I think there's work to be done, and I think that's what we are trying to do. Bring education, try to bring in all the resources, and to destigmatize mental health issues, destigmatize other issues, so that you can at least address them openly. And get them to a place where they are happy and performing well.
Yeah, I mean, I have access to a lot of high performance environments, so I see this in action, and I will say that the head coach is probably the biggest influencer on our team in terms of facilitating mental and physical health resilience. And I don't think that the coach necessarily appreciates how much influence that they actually have, but to me, that's how you get at it, and that's how you get at it really fast. And I've seen it, the head coach of, Penn State football, for example, he's like, sleep is going to be the most important thing that we do this year. He said it, and they had a wildly successful season. But most importantly, the subjective measures of well-being increased. They got better, right? Same Penn State swimming. We did Penn State. We published the case study, so I can talk about it. But I can replicate the same example across, MLB and NHL and NFL and
the seminal
EPL.
study with the Stanford women's basketball team was the first one. They won a national championship.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think the head coach, to really make a difference, head coaches need to be on board.
So,
Thank you.
Augustina, you need to work with the head coach.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So we finished. Thank you very much. I want to thank a big thank you for.
And there you have them. Kirsten, Meeta, Agustina, Matteo, and Thomas with an amazing session about optimizing player performance. What were 3 key takeaways for me from this conversation? First, the importance of sleep as a key element to help prevent injuries. Lack of sleep leads to slower reaction times and poor decision making, which can then lead to injury. Also, the concepts of sleep regularity and sleep debt. Kirsten said at one point, if your athletes get sleep right, they will get 90% of the work done. Second, the connection between mind and body can actually give you an edge over the competition. It is that important. Third, the cost of technology is decreasing, which is good news to improve the capabilities around injury prevention. But coaches and athletes still need to embrace it to its full extension. Is there anything else that stood out for you? If so, please reach out across social media and let us know. And remember, you can subscribe and rate the podcast on the platform of your choice. And of course, you can share it with other colleagues in the industry. Nothing else from my side. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you next time.